Your support means everything. With 90% of our viewers yet to subscribe, we need your help to continue creating engaging content. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. I never imagined I would find myself here, standing on the edge of the life I had so carefully built, questioning everything I once believed unshakable. My marriage, my home, my role as a wife, a mother, and a trusted part of a close-knit family, these were the foundations of my existence. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life, an ache had begun to take root, creeping through the cracks of my heart like ivy against an ancient wall. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than a fleeting restlessness, a byproduct of routine. But deep down, I knew better. It began on a sun-drenched summer afternoon, one of those languid gatherings where laughter and the scent of grilled food mingled with the hum of cicadas. Our families had always been entwined, bound not just by blood but by traditions, shared holidays, and an unspoken understanding that family was everything. Among the familiar faces, one stood out in a way it never had before. Ethan, my husband's cousin, had always been there, a quiet presence in the backdrop of my life. Reserved, introspective, the kind of man who lingered at the outskirts of a crowded room rather than its center. But that summer, something about him felt different. Or maybe it was me who had changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft lavender hues, we found ourselves sitting together on the porch, away from the noise of the gathering. Our conversation began as it always had, polite small talk, reminiscing about past family reunions. But somewhere along the way, it shifted. There was an ease to our words, an unexpected depth to his thoughts that resonated within me. He spoke of dreams, of struggles, of searching for meaning in a world that often felt hollow. And as I listened, I felt something stir within me, a quiet longing, a flicker of recognition. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something. A spark, a tremor, a whisper in the depths of my heart. And it terrified me. I tried to push the memory of that evening aside, burying it beneath the weight of my responsibilities. Yet Ethan lingered in my thoughts, like the melody of a song I couldn't quite forget. I told myself it was nothing, a fleeting moment, a meaningless connection. After all, I loved my husband. Daniel was a good man, kind, dependable, the sort of partner many women would envy. We had built a life together, one woven with shared dreams and quiet contentment. But love, I had learned, was not the fairy tale I once believed it to be. It wasn't an unending rush of passion or a constant state of bliss. It was compromise, routine, the slow intertwining of two lives into one. And somewhere along the way, in the midst of raising children, paying bills, and navigating the mundane realities of adulthood, the spark between us had dimmed. We still loved each other, I was certain of that. But it was a love that had become comfortable, predictable, safe. Ethan, with his quiet intensity and thoughtful gaze, felt like an echo of something I had lost. A reminder of who I used to be, before life became so heavy. At first, our interactions remained innocent, a lingering glance across the room, a brief conversation in the kitchen while others were distracted. Yet each moment felt charged, the air between us thick with unspoken words. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But as weeks turned into months, I found myself drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just his presence that captivated me, it was the way he saw through the mask I wore. The way he recognized the restless longing in me, the quiet ache I had tried so hard to ignore. The first time our connection crossed the line from innocent to something more, it was a crisp autumn evening, the air laced with the scent of fallen leaves, the sky a vast canvas of stars. We had gathered at my in-laws' home for dinner, and as the night stretched on, I stepped outside for a moment of solitude. I found him there, leaning against the porch railing, his breath curling in the cool night air. We talked, as we always did. But this time, there was something different. A vulnerability, a weight to our words that hadn't been there before. I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life, I admitted, the confession slipping free before I could stop it. Like I'm just going through the motions, but not really living. Ethan didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, his expression unreadable. And then, finally, he spoke. I know what you mean. Sometimes I wonder if this is all there is, just existing, instead of really being alive. His words struck a chord deep within me, and for a moment, we simply stood there in silence, the understanding between us more powerful than anything we could have said aloud. When he turned to face me, his eyes held something that made my breath catch, a sadness, a yearning, and something else. Something dangerous. In that moment, I knew. We were standing on the edge of something that could change everything. When the cracks in your life begin to form, they don't appear all at once. They creep in slowly, hidden in the shadows of your routine, seeping into your soul like water through stone. I thought I could ignore them. I thought I could carry the weight of my choices, balance the person I was with the person I was becoming. But the truth has a way of demanding to be heard, even when you try to silence it. The morning after my meeting with Ethan in the park, the world felt heavier. Ending our connection should have brought me relief, maybe even closure, but instead, it left an ache so hollow and deep that I couldn't ignore it. The weight of what I had done, what I still had to do, pressed against my chest, making every breath feel like a struggle. Telling Daniel the truth was inevitable, but the thought of it terrified me. I had always seen myself as strong, as someone who could withstand any storm. But this storm was different, it was one of my own making, and I knew the destruction it would leave behind. The guilt wrapped itself around me, tightening with every moment that passed in silence. For days, I moved through life in a haze of self-reflection, questioning how I had allowed things to unravel so completely. I replayed every moment of my marriage, searching for the places where we had faltered, where we had allowed the quiet between us to grow into something vast and unfamiliar. Daniel had always been my rock, the steady, dependable force in my life. He wasn't one for grand declarations of love, but his devotion was written in the small, everyday gestures. The way he brewed my coffee just right every morning, the way his hand always found mine in moments of uncertainty, the quiet reassurance in his voice when the world felt unsteady. And yet, somewhere along the way, I had stopped noticing. I had stopped listening. Late one evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator, I knew I couldn't keep the truth from him any longer. The guilt was eating me alive, gnawing at my insides until I could barely meet his eyes without feeling like a fraud. He deserved honesty, no matter how much it would hurt him. But how do you find the words to shatter the world of the person you love? How do you tell them that you've betrayed them? It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I finally gathered the courage. The golden light of late autumn spilled through the windows, wrapping the house in a deceptive warmth. The kids were out with friends. Daniel sat in the living room, reading, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. It was such a familiar, comforting sight that for a fleeting moment, I considered walking away, letting the moment pass, burying my secret forever. Then he looked up at me, his expression soft, his love for me still so present in his eyes, and I knew I couldn't hide any longer. "Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" He lowered his book, a faint crease forming between his brows. "Of course," he said, his tone calm but laced with curiosity. "What's on your mind?" I sat down across from him, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingers ached. My heart pounded, drowning out my own thoughts. The words I had rehearsed again and again in my mind suddenly felt small, insufficient in the face of what I was about to confess. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice trembling. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." His eyes searched mine, and I saw it, the flicker of concern, the first trace of unease. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'm listening." And so, I told him. I told him about the growing distance between us, the loneliness that had crept into our marriage, the way I had let myself find comfort in someone else. I told him about Ethan, how it had started, how it had grown, and how, finally, I had ended it. I didn't try to soften the truth, didn't offer excuses or justifications. I laid it all out, raw and unfiltered, my voice breaking under the weight of my own confession. When I finished, silence stretched between us, vast and suffocating. Daniel stared at me, his expression unreadable. His hands clenched tightly in his lap. But in his eyes, I saw everything, the pain, the betrayal, the effort it took to hold himself together. "How long?" he asked finally, his voice low, strained. "Months," I admitted, my hands trembling. "But it's over. I ended it." I swear to you, Daniel, I never. Stop. His voice was quiet but firm, a single word cutting through my desperate plea. He lifted a hand, shaking his head slightly. Just stop. The look in his eyes broke me. It wasn't just anger or hurt, it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. He stood abruptly, pacing the room as if trying to make sense of everything I had just told him. I wanted to reach for him, to beg for his forgiveness, but I knew that nothing I said could take back the pain I had inflicted. Finally, he stopped and exhaled, his voice tight. I need some time. And then he walked away, leaving me alone with the unbearable weight of my own choices. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our home shifted. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with things too painful to say aloud. Daniel was distant, retreating into himself. He spent long hours at the office, coming home late. And when he was home, he barely spoke to me, disappearing into the study or bedroom without a word. The silence, once a quiet comfort between us, now felt like an impassable chasm. One evening, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, he walked into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest, watching me. I held my breath, waiting. We need to talk, he said finally. His voice was steady, but there was something firm beneath it, something resolute. I set the dish down and turned to him, my heart pounding. Okay. He gestured toward the dining table, and we sat down across from each other. The silence between us stretched again, thick with everything we hadn't said. At last, he spoke. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, he said. And I need to know, why? His gaze held mine, steady but wounded. Why wasn't I enough for you? His words sliced through me, sharp and unforgiving. Tears burned at my eyes as I struggled to find the right ones to answer. It wasn't about you not being enough, I whispered, my voice cracking. It was about me. I felt lost, disconnected. And instead of coming to you, instead of telling you how I was feeling, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let myself believe that what I was missing was something you couldn't give me. But the truth is, I never gave you the chance. He exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. I'm not saying I'm blameless, he admitted. I know I've been distant at times. I know I've taken you for granted. But I never imagined you would turn to someone else. His voice broke slightly on the last words, and I felt my heart shatter all over again. I'm so sorry, Daniel, I whispered, my hands trembling. I know I've hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I love you. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. He studied me for a long moment, the weight of everything between us pressing down. I held my breath, waiting for his answer.